So I'm going to go through a quick tutorial on how to graph with Google Sheets. So it's going to be very similar to graphing with Excel like we did in Activity 1 this semester. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. And so I'm going to go ahead and click first on here, the Chem 1B schedule, and go to graphing activity because I'm going to show you how to graph using the data in our last activity here. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy this. So I'm going to highlight the temperature and rate constant data and copy it. And then I'm going to go to my tab that I search for Google Sheets. So personal Google Sheets. And then I want to do a new one here. And so I'm going to click on cell A1 and then paste it in. So there's my data, but I have to do a little something to it because just like a calculator, you need to enter this in correctly. So instead of the 3.52 times 10 to the negative 7, I'm deleting the times 10 to that and replacing it with an E, because that's how Google is going to, or the spreadsheet is going to recognize the number. So I'm just first of all just going here and doing that for all of these, just deleting or replacing the times 10 to the with an E. Okay, so if you remember from the graphing activity, or if you go back and look, if I just graph temperature and rate constant, I'm not going to get a linear graph. And so we want linear graphs. It's going to enable us to use the trend line to figure out different things. So I need to manipulate this data. So I need, based on the equation from that activity, I need to graph 1 over the temperature, 1 over Kelvin. And then I also need to graph, that would be on the y-axis, and then ln of k on the x-axis. So go back and look at that equation to see why I picked those. So to do this, I could solve on my calculator, but a lot easier is I'm going to use the Google Sheets to do it. So I'm going to hit an equal sign, and then I'm going to type 1 over, and then I'm going to click on that temperature, and that temperature is already in Kelvin. So I'm just leaving it as is. I don't need to convert to Kelvin. It's already Kelvin. So then I hit enter and it gives me the value. So I'm clicking on the cell and then I'm going to go to the bottom right corner where I see the cross. And then I'm going to click and drag that all the way down and it's going to calculate 1 over t for all of these values here. So same idea for ln of k. I'm going to hit equals ln, open parentheses, click on that number for k, close parentheses and hit equal. So it took the natural log of that 3.52 times 10 to the negative 7. I'm going to highlight or click on that box, go to the bottom right corner and drag it all down to get the rest of those values. Okay, so now I'm going to highlight to graph. And to graph, I want to click on this graph icon, insert chart, and it looks kind of like a bar graph. And that's actually what it's going to give us. It's going to give us a bar graph, which we don't want. So I'm going to come over to the chart editor on the right, and I'm going to click on scatter. So I want to go to scatter and click on a scatter chart, and it's going to give me my points. Okay, so now I need to add in all the things we need on our graph. So on this same chart editor, I'm going to go to customize, and let's start with our chart titles and axes. So I'm going to start with first the chart title, and I'm going to call this the natural log of k as a function of 1 over t for the decomposition of HI, because that's what the reaction is. So I want to give a good title to it. And don't use verses in your title. Okay, so I went ahead and put that in the middle. I'm going to put it in bold so we can see it. Okay, so now I want to give the axes titles. So I'm going to start with the horizontal, the x-axis, and that was 1 over temperature, and then in parentheses I put the units. So I'm dividing by the Kelvin temperature, so 1 over Kelvin. And that added it, right? So you see our chart title here. And then our axis title, I should say. And then I'm going to do the vertical axis title, the y-axis, and that was the natural log of the rate constant k. And that has no units. If you take the log or natural log of something, the units cancel. So here I have my nice graph with my title, my y-axis label, x-axis label. So now most importantly is we need to go ahead and get a trend line, because we're going to use the trend line. Always we can get information from the slope, the y-intercept, and then also if I know you know, a k value, I could take the natural log of it and figure out at what, you know, the 1 over t, which is the x-axis, using the trend line. So I'm going to click on series here, and I'm going to click on trend line. So it adds that nice line. And then in order to show it, it's a little different on here. The label, instead of none, I'm going to put use equation. So that's the only way I could find to go ahead and put the equation on here. So it's essentially would be this blue dot. That's the data I'm talking about. So the y equals the slope value times x plus the y-intercept. Okay, and remember, just like Excel, Google doesn't keep track of sig figs, right? So you'd have to go back and look at the original data that you had, you know, think about all your sig fig rules. So this 1 over t, I should only have 3 sig figs, and then the natural log of k. Technically now we know that would be 3 decimal places because I had 3 sig figs in k. When you take the log or natural log, you get 3 sig figs. Okay, so anyways, going back to our graph here, one other thing is, let's go back to customize series. I want to also put the r squared value. So at the bottom here, r squared, because remember the r squared tells us how good the fit is. So that's going to be right here for our graph. And maybe I'll move it over here so I know it has to do with the line. Okay, so that's how you're going to get your graph. So you're going to need to do this for experiment 15. You need to take the data that I give you, and you're going to go ahead and, you know, do some calculations. You can do it in your Google Sheet or your Excel, and then you want to make sure you graph the right things on the y-axis and the x-axis, so that for your slope, or so you get a straight line, and then you'll use your slope to help you solve for delta H and your y-intercept to solve for delta S. Okay, so that's what you're going to want to do.